Eleanor Grayson stood at the edge of her garden, her hands buried in the cool, damp soil, pulling weeds with a rhythm that felt like defiance. At 72, her fingers were still nimble, her mind sharper than the shears she used to trim her roses. The sun hung low, casting a golden glow over her modest two-story house in the small town of Willow Creek. This was her sanctuary, her fortress of memories where she'd raised her daughter, laughed with her late husband, and weathered life's storms. But the letter in her pocket, delivered that morning, threatened to uproot it all. Retirement home, she muttered, the words bitter on her tongue. Her daughter, Claire, had been gentle but firm over the phone. Mom, it's time. You're not getting younger, and the house is too much for you to manage alone. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they carried a truth Eleanor wasn't ready to face. The world saw her as frail, a relic to be tucked away in a sterile room with beige walls and bingo nights. But Eleanor saw herself differently. She was a woman who'd built a life, not someone to be shelved. She tossed the weed into a pile and wiped her hands on her jeans. The letter came from Willow Creek Retirement Village, a well-meaning but uninspired facility on the edge of town. She'd visited once, years ago, for a friend. The smell of antiseptic and the hum of fluorescent lights had haunted her. Not for me, she'd vowed. Yet here she was, being nudged toward it by family, by society, by the relentless march of time. That evening, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, the letter spread before her like a battle plan. She traced the words with her finger. We warmly invite you to tour our facility. Warmly. The word felt hollow. She poured a glass of red wine and stared out the window at the fading light. Her mind churned. She wasn't ready to surrender her independence, her purpose. But what could she do? Sell the house and move into that place? Or fight back? The idea came like a spark in the dark. What if she didn't just resist the retirement home? What if she transformed it? Eleanor had always been a dreamer, a doer. In her younger years, she'd turned a failing community garden into a thriving cooperative, rallied neighbors to save a local library, and even started a small catering business from her kitchen. Why not take this last challenge and make it her own? She leaned back, a smile tugging at her lips. If they wanted her in a retirement home, she'd make it a place worth living in, a place that felt like a celebration, not a sentence. The next morning, Eleanor drove to Willow Creek Retirement Village. The building loomed ahead, a squat, gray structure with all the charm of a government office. Inside, the director, Mr. Hargrove, greeted her with a practiced smile. He was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a tie that screamed budget cuts. The tour was as predictable as she'd feared: linoleum floors, faded curtains, a dining hall that smelled of overcooked peas. But as they walked, Eleanor's mind was elsewhere. She saw potential in the wide hallways, the neglected courtyard, the underused common areas. She saw a vision. Mr. Hargrove, she said, interrupting his spiel about bingo schedules. What's the budget for renovations here? He blinked, caught off guard. Renovations. Well, we make do with what we have. Funding is limited. And if someone were to bring in private investment to, say, elevate the experience. His eyes narrowed, but a flicker of curiosity crossed his face. That would depend on the proposal. But we're not exactly the Ritz-Carlton. Not yet, Eleanor said, her voice steady. But what if we could be? Over the next week, Eleanor dove into research. She called old friends from her catering days, reached out to a former colleague who'd gone into real estate, and even contacted a retired architect she'd met at a charity gala years ago. She spent nights poring over design magazines, sketching ideas on napkins, and crunching numbers. The retirement home was outdated, underfunded, and understaffed, but it had good bones. A large plot of land surrounded it, with a view of the rolling hills. The building itself was sturdy, if uninspired. It could be more than a warehouse for the elderly, it could be a destination. Her first ally was Margaret, her best friend since their 20s. At 75, Margaret was a force of nature, with a penchant for bright scarves and unfiltered opinions. When Eleanor shared her idea over coffee, Margaret's eyes lit up. A luxury resort for seniors. Ellie, you're mad. I love it. It's not just for seniors, Eleanor corrected. It's for people who've lived full lives and deserve to keep living them. No more bingo. Think spa days, gourmet dining, art classes, maybe even a rooftop bar. Margaret laughed. A bar. For us old folks. You'll have to fight the board for that one. Then I'll fight, Eleanor said. She wasn't just dreaming now, she was planning. She'd need investors, permits, and a team. But most of all, she'd need the residents themselves to believe in it. Many of them, she knew, felt as she did, dismissed, underestimated, ready for more. Her first step was to rally the current residents. She requested a meeting with them. And Mr. Hargrove, intrigued despite himself, agreed. On a rainy Tuesday, Eleanor stood in the dining hall, facing a crowd of skeptical faces. Men and women, most in their 70s and 80s, stared at her. Some looked curious, others bored. One man in a plaid sweater was already dozing. I know what you're thinking, Eleanor began, her voice clear and steady. Another speech about activities or menus. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here because I got a letter telling me to move in here. And I refuse to let it be the end of my story or yours. She paused, letting the words sink in. This place could be more than a retirement home. It could be a home. A place where we live, not just exist. I'm talking about turning this into a luxury resort, a place where we're treated with the respect we've earned. Fine dining, beautiful rooms, activities that make us feel alive. Who's with me? The room was silent for a moment. Then a woman in a wheelchair, her hair a shock of white, raised her hand. I'm Ruth, she said. I used to be a chef. If you're serious about fine dining, I want in. A man in the back stood up. Name's Walter. I was an engineer. If you need someone to look at the building plans, I can help. One by one, others chimed in. A former interior designer offered to help with decor. A retired musician suggested live performances. Eleanor's heart swelled. These weren't just residents, they were people with skills, passions, stories. They'd been waiting for someone to see it. By the end of the week, Eleanor had a small but dedicated team. She, Margaret, Ruth, and Walter became the core of what she jokingly called Operation Resort. They met daily in the courtyard, sketching plans and dreaming big. Eleanor's vision was taking shape, a place where seniors could live with dignity, surrounded by beauty and purpose. But the road ahead was daunting. Investors would need convincing. The board would need persuading. And the budget was a problem they couldn't ignore. As Eleanor locked up her house that night, she felt a fire she hadn't known in years. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Ruth. Walter, and every person who'd been told their best days were behind them. She wasn't just fighting for a home, she was fighting for a legacy. Eleanor's days became a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and late-night planning sessions. Her kitchen table, once a place for quiet dinners, was now a war room covered in blueprints, fabric swatches, and budget spreadsheets. She'd enlisted a young financial advisor named Liam, a friend of Claire's, who believed in her vision enough to work pro bono. Liam was in his 30s, with a quick smile and a knack for numbers that made Eleanor's head spin. "You're talking about a multi-million-dollar overhaul," he warned, adjusting his glasses. "Investors will want a clear return." "Then we'll give them one," Eleanor said, undeterred. She'd already started researching the growing market for upscale senior living. People were living longer, and many had the means to pay for quality. Willow Creek could tap into that, offering not just care, but an experience. She envisioned a place where families would visit not out of duty, but because they wanted to hear the line between retirement home and resort blurred. Her first pitch was to a local businessman, Mr. Caldwell, who owned a chain of boutique hotels. She met him at his sleek office downtown, armed with a presentation she and Liam had polished for days. Margaret came along for moral support, her bright red scarf a splash of defiance against the sterile boardroom. Eleanor stood tall, her silver hair swept into an elegant bun, and laid out her vision: gourmet dining curated by Ruth, a spa with massage therapists, art studios, and a rooftop garden with views of the hills. Caldwell leaned back, skeptical. "It's a noble idea, Mrs. Grayson, but retirement homes aren't exactly high-return investments. Why would I bet on this?" "Because it's not just a retirement home," Eleanor countered. "It's a lifestyle. People will pay for quality, for a place that feels like a 5-star resort. And we have the talent to make it happen. Residents who've spent their lives as chefs, engineers, designers. This isn't charity. It's business." Caldwell promised to consider it, but Eleanor could see the doubt in his eyes. She left the meeting feeling the weight of the challenge. Back at Willow Creek, though, the residents' enthusiasm kept her going. Ruth had started experimenting with menus, turning the bland dining hall fare into dishes that made even Mr. Hargrove raise an eyebrow in approval. Walter was sketching structural improvements, pointing out ways to open up the space for natural light. Even Margaret, who'd never been one for manual labor, was organizing a committee to brainstorm activities. But not everyone was on board. Some residents resisted change, clinging to the familiar. "I don't need fancy food or a spa," grumbled Harold, a gruff widower in his 80s. "This place is fine as it is." Others worried about costs, fearing they'd be priced out. Eleanor listened patiently, addressing their concerns in meetings. "This isn't about taking away your home," she said. "It's about making it better for all of us." Her biggest hurdle was the board of directors. Mr. Hargrove arranged a meeting, and Eleanor prepared meticulously, knowing she'd face resistance. The board, a group of 5 stern-faced men and women, listened as she presented her plan. She spoke of revenue streams, community impact, and the untapped potential of their residents. But when she finished, the chairwoman, Mrs. Langley, shook her head. "This is ambitious, Mrs. Grayson, but risky. We're a nonprofit. We can't afford to gamble on luxury." "It's not a gamble," Eleanor insisted. "It's an investment in people. Our residents deserve more than mediocrity. And with the right funding, we can attract new residents who'll pay for it." Mrs. Langley's lips thinned. We'll review your proposal. But don't expect miracles. Eleanor left the meeting frustrated but not defeated. She knew she'd need more than passion to win them over. She'd need proof. That night, she and her team hatched a plan to stage a preview event, a taste of what the resort could be. They'd transform the dining hall for one evening, showcasing Ruth's cooking, Walter's design ideas, and Margaret's flair for decor. It would be a risk, dipping into their limited funds, but Eleanor believed it could sway the skeptics. The event took weeks to plan. Ruth recruited a few residents to help in the kitchen, turning out dishes like herb-crusted salmon and roasted vegetable tarts. Walter built a mock-up of a redesigned lounge area, complete with sketches of floor-to-ceiling windows. Margaret scoured thrift stores for elegant table settings, determined to prove that luxury didn't have to mean expensive. Eleanor reached out to the community, inviting local business owners, potential investors, and even the press. The night of the event, the dining hall was unrecognizable. Soft lighting replaced the harsh fluorescence, and tables were draped in white linens. Ruth's food filled the air with mouth-watering aromas, and a string quartet led by a resident named Clara played softly in the corner. Eleanor wore a tailored navy dress, her silver hair glowing under the lights. She moved through the crowd, shaking hands, sharing her vision. Mr. Caldwell was there, as was Mrs. Langley. Even Claire showed up, her eyes wide with pride and surprise. This is incredible, Mom, Claire whispered, pulling her aside. I didn't realize. I thought you were just being stubborn. Eleanor smiled, squeezing her daughter's hand. I'm not ready to fade away, Claire. None of us are. The event was a success. Guests raved about the food, the ambience, the energy. Mr. Caldwell approached Eleanor afterward, his earlier skepticism replaced by intrigue. I'm impressed, he said. I'll talk to my partners. You might have something here. Mrs. Langley was less effusive but agreed to reconsider the proposal. As the night ended, Eleanor stood in the courtyard, watching the last guests leave. The stars were bright above, and for the first time in months, she felt hope. But she knew this was only the beginning. Convincing investors and the board was one thing, actually building the resort would be another. And there were still residents like Harold who needed convincing, not to mention the logistical hurdles of permits and construction. As she locked up the dining hall, Ruth joined her, wiping her hands on an apron. You think we can pull this off, Ellie? Eleanor looked at her friend, then at the stars. We have to. For all of us. The weeks following the preview event were a blur of momentum and obstacles. Mr. Caldwell came through with a partial investment, enough to fund initial renovations. But it came with strings. He wanted a detailed business plan and a timeline. The board, swayed by the event's success, gave tentative approval but demanded regular updates. Eleanor felt the pressure mounting, but it only fueled her determination. She wasn't just building a resort, she was proving a point about what it meant to grow old. She and her team dove into action. Walter's engineering expertise became invaluable as they worked with a contractor to assess the building's infrastructure. The goal was to start small, redesign the dining hall and courtyard, then expand to the living quarters and common areas. Walter's sketches showed open, airy spaces with natural light, modern furniture, and greenery woven throughout. It's about making people feel alive, he said, his eyes bright behind thick glasses. Not like they're waiting to die. Ruth, meanwhile, was training a small crew of residents to assist in the kitchen. She'd created a menu that balanced elegance with comfort, dishes like braised lamb with rosemary and lemon ricotta cheesecake. Food isn't just sustenance, she told Eleanor. It's memory. It's love. Her passion was infectious. And even skeptical residents like Harold started showing up to taste test, grumbling less with each bite. Margaret took charge of aesthetics, sourcing affordable but stylish decor. She had a knack for finding treasures in second-hand shops' vintage chandeliers, plush rugs, paintings that brought color to the walls. We're not just decorating, she said, tying a scarf around her neck. We're telling a story. She also organized art classes, convincing Clara, the musician, to lead a painting workshop. The residents' creations' vibrant landscapes. Abstract swirls began to line the hallways, replacing the faded posters. Eleanor focused on the bigger picture, securing more funding and navigating bureaucracy. She met with city officials to discuss permits, leaning on her charm and persistence to cut through red tape. She also reached out to more investors, pitching the resort as a model for the future of senior living. Some were intrigued, others dismissive, but Eleanor didn't waver. She'd learned long ago that change required patience and a touch of stubbornness. One afternoon, as she reviewed budgets with Liam, Claire called. "Mom, I'm worried you're taking on too much. This is huge. What if it fails?" Eleanor paused, the phone heavy in her hand. "If it fails, I'll know I tried. But I don't think it will. I see the way people here are coming alive. That's worth everything." Claire was silent for a moment. "I'm proud of you," she said finally. "Just take care of yourself. Okay." Eleanor smiled. Always. But not everything went smoothly. Harold and a few others remained vocal critics, arguing that the changes were too extravagant. At a residents' meeting, he stood up, his voice gruff. "This isn't what we signed up for. Some of us just want peace and quiet, not a fancy hotel." Eleanor nodded, keeping her tone calm. "I hear you, Harold. But peace and quiet doesn't have to mean dull. We're building a place where you can choose relax in your room or join a cooking class. It's about options, not obligations." Harold grunted, unconvinced. But another resident, a quiet woman named Edith, spoke up. "I've lived here 3 years, and I've never felt like I belonged. This feels like a home." Her words silenced the room, and even Harold sat down, thoughtful. The first phase of renovations began in the spring. The dining hall was gutted, its linoleum replaced with warm hardwood, its walls painted a soft cream. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in sunlight, and a small herb garden was planted just outside. Ruth's kitchen got an upgrade, with new appliances and a sleek prep area. The courtyard was transformed into a lush oasis, with a fountain, flowering shrubs, and shaded seating. Residents wandered through, marveling at the changes. Even Mr. Hargrove, ever the skeptic, admitted it was impressive. But money was still tight. Caldwell's investment covered the basics, but Eleanor's vision spa facilities, a rooftop lounge, an art studio required more. She and Liam crafted a crowdfunding campaign, targeting families of residents and the broader community. They shared stories of the residents, Ruth's culinary journey, Walter's engineering passion, Clara's music. The campaign gained traction, with local news outlets picking up the story. Retirement home or resort. One headline read. Eleanor smiled when she saw it. They were starting to understand. As summer approached, the resort began to take shape. The dining hall's grand reopening was a celebration, with Ruth's menu stealing the show. Residents dressed up, some in outfits they hadn't worn in years. Clara's quartet played, and Margaret had strung fairy lights across the ceiling. Eleanor watched from the sidelines, her heart full. This was what she'd fought for, not just a building, but a community. Yet challenges loomed. The board was still hesitant about the next phase, and some investors wanted faster results. Harold's grumbling had quieted, but Eleanor knew she'd need to win over every last skeptic to make this sustainable. And then there was her own health. She'd been ignoring the occasional dizzy spells, chalking them up to stress. But as she stood in the courtyard, watching residents laugh and dance, she felt a pang of doubt. Could she keep this up? She pushed the thought aside. There was too much at stake. This wasn't just about her, it was about Ruth, Walter, Edith, and everyone who'd put their trust in her. She'd keep going, no matter what. By late summer, Willow Creek Retirement Village was no longer recognizable as the drab facility Eleanor had first visited. The dining hall and courtyard were complete, and the buzz of excitement among residents was palpable. Word had spread beyond the town, and inquiries about residency were trickling in. Eleanor's vision was taking root. But the next phase, renovating the living quarters and adding luxury amenities, would be the real test. The budget was stretched thin, and the board's patience was wearing thinner. Eleanor threw herself into fundraising with renewed vigor. The crowdfunding campaign had raised enough to start the next phase, but she needed a major investor to cover the spa and rooftop lounge. She reached out to a national senior living company, Pinnacle Care, known for its high-end facilities. Their CEO, Ms. Renata Cole, agreed to a meeting, intrigued by the press coverage. Eleanor prepared meticulously, knowing this could make or break her dream. The meeting took place at Willow Creek, where Eleanor could showcase the progress. Ms. Cole, a sharp woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor, toured the dining hall and courtyard, her expression unreadable. Ruth served a tasting menu, and Walter presented his architectural plans. Eleanor spoke passionately about the residents' contributions and the potential for a new model of senior living. This isn't just about luxury, she said. It's about dignity, about giving people a reason to get up every morning. Ms. Cole nodded slowly. It's innovative. I'll give you that. But the costs are steep, and the market for this isn't proven. Why should we take the risk? Because it's the future, Eleanor replied. People want more than care, they want purpose. We're proving it here, and we can scale it. Ms. Cole promised to discuss it with her team, but Eleanor sensed hesitation. As they parted, she felt a familiar mix of hope and frustration. She couldn't afford to wait for Pinnacle's decision, she had to keep moving. Back at Willow Creek, the residents were stepping up in ways Eleanor hadn't anticipated. Clara organized a weekly concert series, drawing local musicians to perform. Edith, the quiet woman who'd spoken up at the meeting, started a book club that became a hit. Even Harold, the perpetual skeptic, began helping Walter with small repairs, grumbling less with each task. The community was coming alive, and Eleanor felt a surge of pride every time she saw residents laughing, creating, connecting. But her own health was becoming harder to ignore. The dizzy spells were more frequent, and she'd started feeling short of breath during long days. Margaret noticed, pulling her aside one afternoon. Ellie, you're pushing too hard. When's the last time you saw a doctor? I'm fine, Eleanor insisted, brushing it off. There's too much to do. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You're no good to anyone if you collapse. Promise me you'll get checked out. Eleanor relented, booking an appointment. But her focus remained on the resort. The next phase of renovations began, transforming the first floor of living quarters. Old carpets were replaced with hardwood. Walls were painted in soothing blues and greens. And modern furniture arrived. Each room got a small balcony or garden view, designed to feel like a private retreat. Residents moved back in, their faces lighting up at the changes. It's like a hotel, Ruth said, running her hand over a sleek new dresser. But the costs were mounting. Liam warned that without a major influx of cash, they'd stall before the spa or rooftop lounge could be built. Eleanor doubled down on outreach, speaking at community events and pitching to smaller investors. She also started a sponsor a room program, where families could fund a resident's renovated space in exchange for naming rights. It was a slow but steady stream of income. Then came a setback. The board called an emergency meeting, concerned about the pace of spending. Mrs. Langley was blunt. We've supported your vision, Mrs. Grayson, but we're over budget. If Pinnacle doesn't come through, we may have to scale back. Eleanor's heart sank, but she kept her composure. Scaling back means giving up on what makes this special. Give me a month. I'll find the funding. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat in her garden, the cool night air calming her racing thoughts. The doctor's visit had revealed high blood pressure and a need for rest advice she wasn't ready to follow. She thought of her late husband, Tom, who'd always believed in her wild ideas. You've got a fire in you, Ellie, he'd say. Don't let it burn you out. She smiled at the memory, but it was tinged with fear. What if she couldn't do this? The next morning, she got a call from MS. Cole. Pinnacle was interested but wanted a partnership, not just an investment. They'd fund the spa and lounge, but wanted a say in operations. Eleanor hesitated. Control was something she'd fought to keep, but Liam urged her to consider it. We need their money, he said. You can still steer the ship. Eleanor agreed to negotiate, but she insisted on protecting the residents' role in the project. This is their home, she told MS. Cole. They're not just tenants, they're the heart of this place. MS. Cole seemed impressed by her conviction, and they began drafting terms. As autumn arrived, the resort was gaining national attention. A lifestyle magazine ran a feature, calling Willow Creek the future of aging. New residents moved in, drawn by the promise of a vibrant community. Eleanor watched them arrive, their eyes bright with curiosity, and felt a flicker of triumph. But the dizzy spells were worsening. And one afternoon, as she helped Margaret hang a painting, she stumbled, catching herself on a table. Margaret grabbed her arm. That's it. You're seeing the doctor tomorrow. No excuses. Eleanor nodded, her stubbornness fading. She knew Margaret was right. This dream was bigger than her. It belonged to everyone now. She had to stay strong for them. The doctor's diagnosis was a wake-up call. Eleanor had a mild heart condition, manageable with medication and rest, but a warning that she couldn't keep pushing herself to the brink. She left the clinic with a prescription and a promise to slow down, but her mind was already racing back to Willow Creek. The partnership with Pinnacle Care was moving forward, and the next phase of renovations was underway. She couldn't stop now, not when they were so close. Back at the resort, the spa was taking shape. The old activity room was transformed into a serene space with soft lighting, massage tables, and a small sauna. Ruth had suggested aromatherapy, and Margaret was sourcing essential oils and plush towels. Walter was overseeing the rooftop lounge, a sleek design with a bar, lounge chairs, and a pergola draped in vines. The residents were buzzing with excitement, some volunteering to test the spa, others planning cocktail menus for the lounge. Eleanor leaned on her team more, delegating tasks to Ruth, Walter, and Margaret. Liam took over much of the financial negotiations with Pinnacle, ensuring the residents' voices were protected. Clara's concert series had grown, attracting visitors from town, and Edith's book club was now a weekly highlight. Even Harold had softened, joining a woodworking group Walter started. "Guess it's not so bad," he muttered to Eleanor one day, sanding a table leg. She smiled, knowing that was as close to praise as he'd get. The partnership with Pinnacle brought challenges. Ms. Cole's team wanted to standardize some operations, which clashed with Eleanor's vision of a resident-driven community. During one heated meeting, Eleanor pushed back. "We're not a chain," she said. "This place works because it's personal. Take that away, and we're just another facility." Ms. Cole raised an eyebrow but conceded. "You're a tough negotiator, Mrs. Grayson. We'll find a balance." The balance wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Pinnacle's funding allowed the spa and lounge to open by winter, and the response was overwhelming. Residents reveled in massages and yoga classes, while the rooftop lounge became a nightly gathering spot. Ruth's cocktails named after residents, like Clara's Sunset Spritz, were a hit. Eleanor watched from the sidelines, her heart full but her body weary. The medication helped, but she still felt the weight of her years. Claire visited more often, bringing her kids to see the resort. "This is amazing, Mom," she said one evening, sipping a mocktail on the rooftop. "You've changed lives here." Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand. "They've changed mine, too." But the success came with new pressures. The influx of residents meant hiring more staff, and Eleanor insisted on training them to treat residents as partners, not patients. She also faced pushback from some board members who wanted to prioritize profit over community. Mrs. Langley, in particular, questioned the cost of extras like art classes and live music. "We're running a business, not a charity," she said. Eleanor stood her ground. "If we lose what makes this place special, we lose everything. This is about people, not just profit." The board meetings were grueling, but Eleanor's resolve was bolstered by the residents. Ruth, Walter, Clara, and even Harold spoke up, sharing how the resort had given them purpose. Edith, now a confident leader, presented a petition signed by nearly every resident, demanding that the community focus remain. The board relented, but Eleanor knew the fight wasn't over. Her health continued to nag. One evening, as she sat in the courtyard, a dizzy spell hit harder than usual. She gripped the bench, her vision blurring. Margaret found her, panic in her eyes. "Ellie, that's enough. You're stepping back, or I'm telling everyone you're not well." Eleanor wanted to argue, but she saw the fear in her friend's face. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll slow down." She began delegating more, training Ruth and Walter to lead meetings and oversee projects. It was hard to let go, but she saw how capable they were. The resort wasn't just her dream, Anna Marie, it was theirs. One night, as she watched Clara perform a violin solo under the rooftop pergola, Eleanor felt a peace she hadn't known in months. The stars were bright, the air warm, and the laughter of her friends filled the space. This was what she'd fought for. By spring, Willow Creek was a national model. Other retirement homes sent representatives to study their approach. Eleanor was invited to speak at a senior living conference, where she shared the stage with Ms. Cole. This started with a letter telling me to give up, she told the audience. But we didn't. We built a place where age is a privilege, not a limitation. The crowd applauded, but Eleanor's eyes were on her team in the front row: Ruth, Walter, Margaret, Clara, Edith, and even Harold, who gave her a grudging nod. They'd done this together. 2 years after that first letter, Willow Creek Retirement Resort was a beacon of what senior living could be. The spa was booked weeks in advance. The rooftop lounge hosted weddings and community events, and the art studio buzzed with creativity. New residents arrived monthly, drawn by the promise of a vibrant life. The staff, trained in Eleanor's ethos of respect, treated residents as partners, and the board had finally embraced the vision, with Mrs. Langley admitting, "You proved us wrong, Mrs. Grayson." Eleanor had officially moved in, not because she'd given up, but because she wanted to be part of the community she'd built. Her small suite overlooked the courtyard, with a balcony where she grew roses. She still led occasional meetings, but had handed most responsibilities to Ruth, Walter, and a new resident council. Her health was stable, thanks to medication and a lighter workload. But she knew her limits now. Margaret kept a close eye on her, ever the protective friend. The resort's success rippled beyond Willow Creek. Other facilities adopted their model, and Eleanor consulted with them, sharing blueprints and stories. She wrote a memoir, not done yet, which became a modest bestseller among seniors and their families. Claire and her kids visited often, and Eleanor cherished watching her grandchildren play in the courtyard, surrounded by people who'd become her family. One evening, as summer turned to fall, Eleanor sat on the rooftop with Ruth, Margaret, Walter, Clara, Edith, and Harold. They toasted to the resort's second anniversary, Ruth's signature cocktails sparkling in the twilight. "To us," Eleanor said, raising her glass. "To proving them wrong." Harold, now a regular at the woodworking shop, chuckled. "You're a pain, Ellie, but I'm glad you didn't listen to that letter." Laughter filled the air, and Eleanor looked around at the faces that had carried her through. This wasn't just a resort, it was a testament to resilience, to the idea that life didn't end at 70, 80, or beyond. It was a place where people found purpose, where they were seen not as old, but as alive. As the stars came out, Eleanor felt a quiet satisfaction. She'd turned a retirement home into a legacy, not just for herself, but for everyone who dared to dream with her. The letter that had once felt like a sentence was now a distant memory, replaced by the hum of a community that thrived. She leaned back, her heart steady, and knew she'd found her place not in fading away, but in building something that would outlast her.